to continue, where we were is saying that these are the kind of questions that market research can answer. How satisfied are my customers? Which newspaper should advertise in? Should we go ahead and add the new ad, etc., 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 right? And market research is the field that can provide the answers. I'll repeat that bit because I did not wear the mic. So the point is that market research is the field that can provide the answers to all these questions. Why is my market share dropping? How well has my campaign performed? Who are my most important customers? Which newspaper should advertise in? So on and so forth. So market research is the field that answers the questions which are there in the brand manager's mind. Right? Let's go forward. So the role of market research, to redefine it from a different angle. I'm sorry, we have to go back one step. So the role of market research, to redefine it from another angle, is it must provide information to the brand manager. The information must satisfy two important qualities. One, it must be reliable. Two, it must be actionable. What is reliable? It should be genuine. It shouldn't be fake. It should not be something which is collected from very dicey or unreliable sources. Right? What is actionable? There are a million things that you want to know, but only some of them is stuff that you can act on. Okay? No. So I'll give you an example of this. Let us have a situation where a company says, I want to know what the profile, let's say it's a company that lends money to customers, financing company. So there are some customers who pay the money regularly. There are some other customers who don't pay the money, the loan regularly, right? Who don't pay the EMIs consistently. So let's say this company says that I want to find out the profile difference. What kind of people are good EMI payers? What kind of people tend to be defaulters who don't pay regularly? Okay, let's say we do a lot of analysis and we come back to them with the results. And if we come back to them and we tell them that people who tend to pay the loan regularly are people who are employed and not in business, people who are aged between 35 and 45 years, and people who are at least postgraduate in their studies, compared to people who don't pay well, are the people who are running a business, right, who are 50 to 60 years of age and who are less than graduation. This is perfect. So then the company can now concentrate on employed people of a certain age group for certain qualifications. So they know that, there will be people who are likely to pay well. However, if the analysis comes back and says people who pay the loan well are aged 49.2 years on average, and the people who don't pay the loan properly are aged 48.5 years on average, that's useless data. First of all, there's no difference between 49 and 48. Plus, it is not actionable. Right? So that's what we mean by actionable research. So both these conditions should be met, reliable and actionable, so that the brand manager can take an appropriate action. It may be to increase advertising, it may be to change the brand name, it may be to change the packaging, it may be to reduce the price of the product, it may be to change the kind of advertising we're doing. Whatever, the appropriate action will be suggested from the kind of data that comes. Right? Let's go forward. So market research can be of four kinds. Number one is something called desk research. So sorry. Number one is something called desk research. Number two is called observation research. Number three, and this is the main thing that we do, primary research or survey. Many people just call it survey. Right? No, research people like us tend to get a little offended if just say survey, because survey is just the process of going out and asking questions, whereas research is more around it than that. But essentially that's what it is. It is survey research. Now, Most people will not include analytics here, but I am including analytics here, and I'm saying that is also kind of research. Why? Because market research is about finding answers to questions about the market, which is what analytics does. In the other three things, we find it from outside, from the customers by going out in the market. Here we find it from inside, in the sense the data is already lying with the company. And we do analysis of that data, analytics of the data. That's the only real difference. But essentially, this is also meant to give you insight, which helps the marketing manager to take an appropriate decision. So I'm calling it as part of market research, but we should remember that the main focus of this course is not on this. It is mainly on primary research, but to some extent it is on the desk research and observation research as well. So let's see about each of this is very quickly. So what is desk research? Let's first focus on what is desk research. Basically, desk research is you refer the data which is already published. Could be published anywhere. You do not go out and collect data. You refer data which is already published, right? It could be published in newspapers, it could be published in the internet, it could be published in the company's own website, right? All companies have a financial report, and public limited companies, the data is available for people to see. Public limited companies, the financial data is available, with government bodies for us to check, right? So all that becomes sources from which we get information. And therefore, if you go and use those to collect data, it becomes desk research. So one example of this could be, which are the largest bicycle manufacturers in India? You can go to the internet and Google, say, bicycle manufacturers in India. You'll get some 10, 12 names. Then you can go to the companies, that each of these companies' financial reports, profit and loss, statements and so forth. From that, you will know how much of sales they have, how much of profit they have, how many cycles they have sold. So you can conclude saying which are the 5 or 6 largest bicycle manufacturers in India. There may also be, some journalists may have written an article about, TI Cycles sells 20% of India's bicycles. Hero sells 25%. So from those kind of articles also you get information about which are the big bicycle manufacturers. So that's an example of how desk research is done. Again, desk research is only as good as the data available. You should never forget that. Sometimes data is not available, right? So you will judge desk research based on our data source. Is it authentic, as in genuine and reliable? Is it current or is it outdated? You don't want a report which says in 1993, Hero Cycles sold 100,000 cycles. Irrelevant. We are in 2022 today. 30 years ago, what happened? Nobody is interested in knowing. Sometimes some portion is available, but not completely. Therefore, how much of the required information is available? This is the way you judge desk research. Is it okay? Can we go forward? So the next thing we are talking about is observation research. Now, this is difficult research. It requires a very high degree of skill. It involves observing consumers in their real life environment. Right? There's a very famous set of books about how people, buy in malls. It is written by an author called Paco Underhill. What he did is he observed people in malls. He didn't go and ask questions. Right? Now we can do the same thing in a supermarket. We can observe how a person enters a supermarket. Do they, for example, let's say a lady enters to buy shampoo. So we will be standing there observing. She goes to the shampoo counter. We can see how many packs she picks up. Correct? At that time, we can note whether she only looks at her eye level, or does she look above, or does she look below also. We can look at whether she takes the pack and tends to look at the price, or she just looks at the pack, or does she look at the price. We can see whether the eye goes to 1 + 2 offer free here. We can observe all those things. Then when she comes back to the billing counter, we can see whether she looks. Sometimes, there will be small items on the billing counter, near the billing counter, 10 rupee, 15 rupee items. We can see whether the eyes are looking at all those things, or whether she's just standing there for the billing, trying to pick up a product. So if you observe 50 such consumers, you can start forming conclusions about how consumers behave in the supermarket. That is observation research.
We can do this So installing cameras also. Right?
Interesting. Observation doesn't have to be. You can capture it through video and then analyze it later. Absolutely. You don't necessarily have to stand there. There are many situations where a camera is, of course, you have to take permission. You will have to put a notice saying this is under monitoring or some such thing.
Okay.
Right? So there is something called mystery shopping. When a customer behaves like a researcher behaves like a shopper and goes to the store and observes how the salespeople behave and interact, right? So the salesperson doesn't know there's not a real customer. They think it's a real customer. That's why it's called a mystery shopper. There's something called slice of life studies, where we go into a respondent's house and we can see, how things are laid out in her kitchen. So does she keep the masala powders here? Does she keep the oil here? How she lights the gas, right? Does she tend to use the right hand or does she tend to use the left hand? Many of us don't even think about it, right? Do you know whether you light a matchstick like this or like this? You don't know for sure, do you?
With your right hand or left hand?
Right hand only. But we don't know what others are doing.
But you don't know what others are doing. Sometimes you don't even know what you are doing. Right? Whenever you open a lock, like, do you know whether you hold the lock with your right hand and open it with your left hand, or hold it with your left hand and open it with your right hand? Do you know?
No, depends upon the situation only. It differs.
But naturally, which comes to you, we don't know.
Oh, yes.
Right? I didn't know. But I think I hold it like this and I open it like this because I'm a right-hander. Right? Small things. Observation research can tell you those. This is just not useful from a marketing point of view. It's not actionable. But there could be a lot of things about how a kitchen is laid out. What kind of items need to be near the gas stove. That could become useful information for a manufacturer of gas stoves. Yes, sorry.
Can this be done online also? For example, I look at it through a video call.
Absolutely, you can. See, either way, whether you're going to the person's house or whether you're going to do it online, you need the person's permission to do it. In both, you need the person's. Both are intrusive.
Will we be able to do as much as an observation online if we do it online as compared to when we go to the house?
In the context of a kitchen, I'm thinking as you ask. I'm not so sure because sometimes things are kept behind the person in the kitchen. So unless you've got a camera that captures this and a camera that captures that and then overlays the picture like a 3D picture, it may not always be possible. Whereas a human being there can go around doing it. But then there are advantages in doing it online. The advantages are that you have a record. Whereas there a person is there and the person can forget later. So a camera can record it. Let's take another situation where you want to know how people watch TV. Correct? You can put a camera on top of the TV and observe the family. There a camera is perfectly good enough. We can actually exactly capture how the family is sitting in front of the TV and actually family sits in front of a TV, but still.
Okay.
Right?
I have seen when I've gone to some supermarkets, I have seen people look at the stock and then write down things. Would that also be observation or is it something else?
I don't think that's observation because if I've correctly understood what you're saying, those are people from the manufacturer who are going to see whether there is expired stock on the shelf and so on and so forth. So those are checks. I don't think that would come with observation. Observation is when you are observing how the consumer behaves. Here you're talking about how somebody is observing the packs. That's not the same as observation research.
Okay.
Right? Is this clear? Let's go forward.
I have a doubt.
Yes.
So therefore, would it be right to say that observation research involves a high degree of judgment from the researcher and the observation is done by the researcher only?
Yes, observation has to be done by the researcher because it necessarily involves judgment of which angle to look and where to look.
So not everybody can.
Not everybody can be allowed enough. Even if it is a camera, the camera has to be placed appropriately by a researcher. It can never be a mechanical process.
Okay. So mystery shopping also it has to be done only by researchers, is it?
Mystery shopping can be done by anybody who fits the. For example, let's say we're doing a mystery shopping for the real estate company. Let's say they have got one kind of apartment blocks in the middle income group, another kind of apartment blocks in the very, very upper income group. The person who goes as a mystery shopper in the middle income group must look like a middle income customer.
Okay.
And the person who goes to the upper income, the premium kind of apartment, must look premium. Otherwise, they won't be believable.
Okay.
So, mystery shopping, the customer has to be believable. So
how does that person use judgment to?
No, they are not supposed to use judgment.
Okay.
That person will give given a checklist. That ideally, mystery shopping is done with only a checklist and nothing more than that. Judgment is not advised.
Okay. So only for mystery shopping, the researcher need not be involved. Is that what you're saying?
Anybody who can follow instructions can do mystery shopping.
Okay.
But the kind of observation which involves behaving how a shopper behaves in real life requires a researcher to do it.
Okay.
At least the researcher to set it up and the camera can capture it later.
Okay.
Right? Okay. So, So we're now going to talk about primary research as the next topic, right? Shall we go forward?
Yes, sir. So before that, I have one doubt.
Sure.
Is desk research is also called as secondary research?
Absolutely. That's a good point. In fact, desk research is indeed also known as secondary research. Right? And that is the reason survey research is known as primary research. So primary as in go out and collect data fresh for us. Desk research, secondary as in we see data which is already collected by somebody and is published. Right? Okay. So let's look at primary research. So primary research is the main focus of this course. Mainly because this is where concepts are involved, concepts that we can learn. So, how do you select a random sample? How do you decide the sample size? How do you write a questionnaire? How do you interpret data? How do you do statistical testing? There are so many concepts, right? So, questionnaire, sample size, sampling method. How do you interpret data? Hypothesis testing, so on and so forth. There are many concepts which are involved here, right? So this is where the real learning is involved. And we will come to this, but primary research itself, as we'll see just in the very next chapter, primary research itself can be broken up into consumer research, industrial product research, social research. Right? Within that, we can talk about employee research, so on and so forth. So, primary research is a big field by itself, right? Any questions? So, can we go forward here? Yeah, let's go forward. And finally, as I said earlier, analytics. I'm saying it's part of market research, but we're not going to cover that in this course here because you're doing a BSc data science course. You will cover various methods of analytics elsewhere. So we're not going to talk about that here. But I'm saying it's part of market research because this also involves searching for relevant insight and using that insight to take action. Right? The key difference between the analysis that we do in market research and primary market research and the analysis done in analytics is in the size of the data. Analytics normally works in something called big data. So, you talk to a consumer retail chain, for example. They may have several lakh records in a 6-month period. That's big data. And you can analyze the data to derive a lot of insight. Whereas primary market research is done with a sample size of, sometimes as little as 200, sometimes as much as 5,000. But it is still manageable and relatively smaller data. But the principles are generally the same. Second difference is that analytics works on data which is already lying with the company, whereas market research is data collected through a study for that purpose. So analytics is on data that is collected as a part of doing the business. The data is there, you analyze it. In market research, you say, I want some specific data, and you go out and look for it, right? So this is a broad overview of the market research industry all about. We'll just have a quick sum up of this here. Can we go forward? So to sum up what market research is all about, there are several functions that support the brand management role, and market research is one of those functions. The essential job of market research is to find answers to questions that the brand manager may have about the market, about the consumers, about the brand, etc., etc., etc. It could be any questions about the market. The answers have to be reliable and relevant from an actionability point of view. Actionability is the final, most important metric that we're looking for here. There are broadly 4 kinds of market research, and we'll be focusing mainly on primary research, which is survey research. So primary research involves conducting a survey for the purpose of answering the specific questions that have come up at that point in time, right? Okay, so this brings us to the end of the first chapter. We'll meet again for the next chapter. Thank you.